Okay, great. Hello, guys. Welcome to the session on UI UX. So hopefully you would have attended the CLAP orientation program. You would have understood how the problem statement works across, let's say hiring in a technical company or in a very creative domain like UI UX and all those things, right? So it's going to be very challenging when you look at it. So in this session, we'll probably spend some 5-10 minutes understanding what are the technicalities of this domain called as UI UX. What are the skill sets that are required? Where does this domain have applications? And most importantly, how is that you are going to be a part of this CLAP program, ensuring yourself a job or an internship in this particular domain. So 5-10 minutes, we'll have some very interesting conversation. At the end of this discussion, I'll give you certain call to actions. For example, if you want to get in touch with us regarding this program, you want to understand more about this program, I will give you the call to action. You can kind of note down the details and then get in touch with us. Okay, let's get started, guys. Now, first of all, when you look at UI UX, right? What is basically an user interface? Now let's differentiate this UI and UX. Okay, people think there are two different things, but essentially the one and the same. But at least you need to understand what is an UI and what is an UX, so that you can basically look at it from two different perspectives. Now, what is a user interface? For example, let's take steering, car steering, right? The steering is basically the interface that you have with the car, right? You kind of control the car with that. Or the best example, your remote, right? When you watch televisions, Netflix, etc., you have a remote. Similarly, right, user interface always determines what is the action that is going to happen with the system or the device or something like that. Whereas what is user experience is that it's the overall experience. For example, when you drive the car, the feeling that you have, or when you watch the TV, the movie, the emotions that you have, etc., etc. Okay, now this looks very theoretical. Let's get into some applications and understand what exactly is a good versus a bad UX. Okay, what do you mean by a good versus a bad UI UX is that there are certain places. For example, let's take a car steering. If your car steering was on the right hand side of your hand, right, do you think you can drive easily? It should be right below your eyes so that you can also see the road, at the same time have a control. Similarly, it can't be on the left, it can't be on the bottom, etc., etc. So a good UX is where a steering is there right before you, whereas a bad UX is if a steering is elsewhere, anywhere else. Okay, so let's look at some actual examples. For example, take your charger pins. Right, your iPhone users, you guys are very, very lucky here, because you have one of the most finest designers designing your products, accessories, and your interfaces. Okay, whereas Android, I don't want to comment upon it. So the point is very simple, guys. When you look at Android, right, the problem, you take a USB as well as a C-type pin, right? I mean the old Android pins. You need to insert it only in a particular direction, because if you reverse it, the fit does not happen. Whereas when you take an iOS charger, right, you insert it anywhere, it always works. So the point is, when the designers worked on such things, right, they looked at the compatibility features, right? They ensure that the user might very quickly connect it. So all what he wants to understand is there's a hole, there's a port, and there's a pin. We need to connect it. You don't need to say the direction, right? That's always been the problem. Even today, USBs are still like that. Next thing is basically lift. When you look at the elevator buttons, right, what is a bad UX is that you look at the left hand side, right, the one that I'm kind of circling here, right? You can see why this is a very, very bad design. Reason is very simple. There are lights button that you press. When you press means it's switched on, right? And there are directions given up and down. But if you look at it, right, there is a down direction. Now the down direction might indicate this light, the down direction might indicate this light. The user might get confused. Whereas here it's very, very clear, because the light glows inside the button itself. So up and down are very clearly differentiated. See, these are very, very simplistic things, guys. But just imagine, no, there is a lift in a very busy building. 100 to 100 people use the lift on an everyday basis. How much confusion is going to cost? So the point is very simple. The aspect might be simple. You might ask, Hemant, what are you showing me some silly examples when you talk about the technicalities of UI UX? But that's not actually silly, guys. It has a very big impact. Okay, for example, let's take this actual big impact. You look at all your I'm not sure whether you would have seen this in your college, right? You have a writing desk, right? For example, when you sit in audiovisual rooms or when you sit for an exam hall, etc., etc., and there is a pad, right, where you kind of flip it, open it, close it, etc. So you sit on it, you close it, and write it. Once you want to get up, you open that. You don't need it, you open that, right? But if you look at all the pads of this sort, right, it is always right-handed. So people sit, they use the right-handed thing, and they write it. Now, my point is, yes, if you take 100 people, maybe 1 or 2 people will be lefties, no doubt about that. But what do those 1 or 2 people do? What do they do for the chairs with them? So that's why we have something called as a dual way chair, where left or right can actually write it. So the point is very simple. Even a minuscule aspect or even a large aspect in a design is very, very important, guys, whether it has a practical application or a visual application, right? So the next thing is that, right, now what does Dane Miller says? Dane Miller is one of the very famous web developers. If you have to differentiate what is UI and what is UX and what is a good UI UX experience, is that UI, the user interface, is the saddle, the stirrups, and the reins. For when you ride on horse, right, you have the saddle, right? You have the stirrups, is where you kind of sit on that, etc., etc. Now, this is the user interface. You use this to control the horse and ride the horse. What is the user experience? Is that the way you're able to ride in the horse, the pleasure that it gives you, right? You're able to control it, you're able to stop it, you're able to walk, you're able to run. That is user experience. Okay, now I want to suggest some very interesting everyday examples. Only then you'll be able to understand. Okay, for example, we've already seen some, but let's understand UI and UX in an everyday example. Now, what is a user interface in an everyday example? Take your ketchup bottle, right? Your Heinz ketchup or any ketchup for that matter, right? Now, the brand decides what is the font that I must use, what is the content that I must show, what are the kind of images that I must show in the interface so that the user understand what is the layout it should be. It should be in a triangle shape, square shape, or a very customized shape. This is user interface. When you look into it, you understand the Heinz tomato ketchup, visually images given so that you kind of immediately capture it. All these things are user interface. What is the user experience? If you look at Heinz, right, I think it was 4-5 years back, they had a very bad design. So what happens with ketchup is that ketchup is a very, very strong, thick liquid. So whenever you place the liquid in a bottle, due to gravity, the liquid comes down, stays there. So when you kind of invert it and poke it, right, you need to push it. You've seen this difficult, you know, tuck, 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 you push it on there, only then the ketchup comes down, right? Now, what is a good design? I'll tell you. For example, look at this particular bottle. Okay, the lid is basically down, and the lid is the bottom of the bottle. So how you store the bottle in a space is where the lid is downside. So gravity, due to gravity, the liquid, right, the ketchup naturally falls down. So all you need to do is open and do a very gentle press. Beautifully, the sauce comes out. For example, take the differentiation between a shampoo and a conditioner. Shampoo is little bit less viscous, more liquid, right? Whereas a conditioner is more viscous, thicker. So what happens is when they design, the shampoo is made with the top open bottle like this type, so that you know the moment you put it down, it immediately comes on. Whereas a conditioner is put on with the bottom open. So that's the difference, guys. Interface will tell you what are the designs, what are the functionalities, etc., etc. Experience is how the user looks at your products and uses it and feels good or bad about it. So now this everyday example gives you a much better picture. For example, right, let me show you some very recent application. For example, how can a good UI UX help with the COVID-19? Right, everybody is worried about this pandemic, what is going to happen, etc., etc. Now, I'll very quickly tell you how a UI UX can help here. For example, there was this app called as Arogya Setu app that was developed by the Indian government, right? If you look at the little bit specs of it, right, there is a number of internet users across different age. You can see that predominantly the number of internet users are in the age bandwidth of 40 to 60. That is early stage till 40, and 40 to 60 is where you have the majority. Very less number of people from the age-old experience use the internet problem, which means they're not so internet savvy. So any application they use, they will initially struggle to kind of use and do something with it. And the other problem is that if you look at COVID as a disease, right, the fatality rate among the age group 60 is much higher. People who have more than 60 years of age, the fatality rate for them is much higher, because we know that, right, the pandemic has hit the old people very, very severely. Whereas the young folks, though they get infected, right, the fatality rate has been very, very less because they self-recover, etc. So what is the functionality? Is very simple. You are building an app. Problem number one is that your app is predominantly used by people who have more than age 60. Why? Because they have the highest fatality rate. Right. So, for example, when old people log into an airplane or when they have some services that come home, they always need to have the app mandatory. So, what a user should have in mind? My target audience are people who are more than age 60, right? Because that's the people who are going to ultimately use it. Therefore, the functionality has to be very, very easy. If you look at it, right, the app has been very, very successful. Why? 100 million plus downloads, guys, just in a 2-month release. Okay, it's available in 155 different countries, 4.5 out of 5. And it's one of the top 5 ranked apps in India and available in 12 languages as well. So massive success, which means the designers have spent an enormous amount of energy to understand and perceive their user behavior. Due to which, right, if you can really look at how very simple the app, right, you guys have used it, right? You should know about it, right? For example, there are different languages to give you language flexibilities. Most importantly, the user interface is very, very less. And you just take a simple assessment test. They ask you a bunch of questions in your own specific language. That's it. Your app functionality is done. Right? No uploading complex data, no downloading complex data, no very cluttered experience, very simple experience. You choose the language, you click the next button, you take some simple tests, give some answers honestly to it, and then the app functionality is sorted, guys. People even with age of 60 plus can easily go through this particular app. So let's understand one thing. UI UX doesn't mean you're sending some designs to the developers. It doesn't mean you're creating something. You have to take into account how your users feel and behave about that. So it is not just some bunch of design where you quickly go through an online course and get it. It is a skill that you need to develop over a period of time where you understand your user deeply. There are people who have been in the industry for more than 10 years who still call themselves as a very average UI UX difference, because the people, how they perceive it is very, very different, guys. There are everyday problem statements that come into the picture. Now, let's very quickly understand which are the industries. For example, when you pick up an UI UX career, which are the industries or which are the domains you're going to go and work. For example, I can always talk about e-commerce, your websites, apps, etc. Banking and finance sector, your Google Pay, your Phone Pay, etc. Healthcare, for example, you have your Arogya Setu app. Government app, for example, you have your Aadhaar, e-Aadhaar, you have an e-license, etc. Information technology, automobiles, for example, in automobiles, if you look at it, right, you take your car has a dashboard, a music player, etc., etc. Manufacturing always has application. For example, you look at a control plant, your power plant, etc. Education, online courses, Byju's app, Career Labs app, etc., etc. Right. So these are all the major industries. Let's very quickly understand that. For example, let's take our famous e-commerce. Right, you have a mobile app where there are different products that are very, very clearly displayed. So the user has to be ensured that whatever he is coming and searching for, he gets it right on his platform, right? So that's why the products are always categorized. For example, is it a beauty and creaming, or is it something related to foods? Is it something related to offers? Is it something related to groceries, etc., etc.? So the classification and the user experience is very, very clear there. So what do you do? Whenever you land on an app, you're very, very clear, right? What you want to buy, tuck, 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 you buy. Or even if you want to explore, you have a very good experience that is given there. Similarly, let's take healthcare sector. For example, you have your wearable. For example, I am wearing a smartwatch, right? So you have your Apple smartwatch, etc., etc. All wearable devices are there. Healthcare has its very important application. For example, pharmacy. Pharmacy has an application. There's an e-pharmacy on the app, right? The next thing is in terms of manufacturing. Let's say once you start working, right? It's not that every day you'll be going to the plant and seeing what's happening there. You'll be remotely sitting somewhere and still be looking at the functionalities. Why? Because the user dashboards were designed for that accordingly, so that the employee, the user, has a very good experience of the same, right? And most importantly, automobiles. That's where I told, right? You have your dashboards of music players. You're able to change the AC of the car, etc., etc. A central console unit is always given. So the point is very, very simple, guys. When we go a little bit deeper, right, I will tell you some very, very 10 heuristic design principles, some very interesting principles. These are the core principles, heuristic design principles of UI UX. But the point is that you will understand, hey, these things are actually not very complicated. If I look at my open and look at my everyday life, right, all these principles have been very much a part of my life. You will understand that. Okay, so let's very, very quickly run through this 10 heuristic design principles. Okay, now first, the visibility of the system status. What do you mean by that? Is, for example, battery, right? Green means it's completely good. Okay, red means it's almost going to get empty. Yellow means it's getting less, etc. Or you use bars, right? 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar, 4 bar. Or the loading status, for example, 5%, 10%, 60%. In YouTube, there is a buffer. Red color is a place where you actually played and seen it. Gray color is a place which is loading, and the black color is something that is yet to be loading. Right. So these are all visible statements of heuristic principle. So whenever something is designed, this is the first principle they should consider. How can the app, visually look better? Second important thing is match between the system and the real world. You're giving a design. The user knows what is this design all about. He looks at it, apps it. Now, how much this is correlated to the reality? For example, let's take our mobile apps. We have a payment gateway as an app, right? For example, look at Amazon Pay and MobiKwik's logo, right? They have a wallet in the logo. So whenever the user looks at Amazon Pay logo, right, he knows that, okay, he must pay a money there. It is something related to transaction. For example, you see a Kindle, right? When you kind of change the pages, the way the book changes the page, it will change accordingly. So this is the second principle where you match your system designs with what's actually happening in the real world. Very interesting principle. The next thing is that user control freedom. For example, you have your undo, redo. When you open your Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, you have your stop button, pause button in your music players, in your recording systems, etc., etc. So this is user control and freedom. How much freedom he has over certain aspects, right? The other thing is that consistency and standards. What do you mean by consistency and standards? Is that, for example, right? Look at the left design. Okay, there is a download icon. There is some search icon. There is a cart icon. You put your items in the cart and you check out. But they're all in different designs. So user now is able to correlate. Now look at this, right? Download is in green color. Search is in orange. Buy is in blue color, and everything with the same level of icons and color codes. So it is more easier for the consistency and standard is there for the user. And most importantly, error prevention. For example, when you send an error by mistake, when you send a mail by mistake, you are saving something, but you forgot to save. You're working on something you forgot to save, and you're just closing the window. Then immediately a pop-up will come. So these are all error prevention. You should ensure these are also there as a part of your UI UX communication. Right. The next thing is recognition. What do you mean by recognition? The best example is Google, guys. Beautiful design. Okay. Whenever you type something, immediately it comes, right, based on your search history, etc. Or when you are trying to type an email to somebody, right, you just type in A, B, or CH, immediately people with CH name comes into the picture. So for example, if I'm sending the mail to Hemant, right, HE, I just type HE, Hemant will come, Hema will come, Hari will come, etc., will come, right? So the next important point is flexibility. What do you mean by flexibility? Is that the best experience you would have had, right? When you're trying to fill a form, okay, every time you need to enter your name, address, etc. Whereas there's something called as an autofill form. Google Chrome has it. So you click on that particular option, enable it. Whenever you fill a form, just to fill Hemant or whatever is your name, all the details get filled. Right. For example, your desktop shortcuts, I mean your keyboard shortcuts have flexibility. Right. This is the seventh principle. The eighth principle is kind of aesthetics and minimal design. Right. What do you mean by aesthetic and minimal design? For example, let's look at Gmail. Okay. A simple envelope logo with M is embedded inside that. Now, one very interesting, if you look at Google Drive, right, there's a green color strip, yellow color strip, and a blue color strip. You know what are these three things? Green color strip indicates Google Sheet, yellow color strip indicates Google Slides, whereas blue color strip indicates Google Word document. Simple design. Okay, he's saying in my Drive you can store all these things. YouTube, a simple play button with a TV-like option. Look at Google Maps. No, they have a green color, yellow color, blue color, white color. Why? Because green indicates land, blue indicates water, yellow indicates highway, white indicates normal roads, kind of gray indicates hilly regions, and you have a location there. So everything is given a very, very minimalistic but yet a sophisticated design. For example, look at this cake design. The A is in the shape of a cake, the piece of cake, right? And look at login into Twitter. Very, very simple. Login, that's all. They never tell you type in your details, press enter, etc. Simple, login. So aesthetics and minimalistic designs are very, very important. Similarly, right, the other thing is that you kind of diagnose what is a picture or error recognitions, or let's say stinker names, etc. For example, you try to rename a name, it's an error there. It tries to indicate and tells you in advance. So this is a ninth principle you should keep in mind. Kind of help your users to recognize where is an error, kind of diagnose what's happening without the user need to essentially go through that. Right. For example, you just close the Chrome window, right? You want to restore it again. So rather than you going and opening each and every window, there's a restore button. Click that, all the window opens. You have faces in everyday life, right? And the next thing is very important is helping in documentation. For example, though you give the best experience to your user, okay, though you give the best experience to user, your app will always have some doubts. Okay, for example, it looks very easy for a kid. Maybe for a middle-aged person, for an let's say a very elderly person, it may look a little bit challenging. So you still have user experience, or let's say help experience to show that. For example, swipe up for more info, swipe down to save that card, right? There's also a help section. If you go click there, it will give you instruction, etc. So this is the 10th principle you need to keep in mind. Despite you taking care of all the 9 principles, if your user is still able to find some troubles, you give him very simple instructions. Okay, so that comes us to the last very important part of the thing is, what is that is, what are the tools, what are the skills that you guys need to develop in order to become a successful, let's say, UI UX designer. Now, what is the point is that if you look at it, right, majority of the tools that you need to use is Photoshop, and Sketch is something you use, and Illustrator is something you use. You use InVision to give the user experience. For example, before you actually release the app, you put it on InVision and you kind of have an actual experience of clicking in different places. So there are different kinds of software that you use depending upon the percentage. What do you mean by percentages? These many number of, for example, if you find 100 job descriptions, 76 of them would require Photoshop for you to have Photoshop. So it becomes one of the top skills that you need to learn. 60% of them would actually require Sketch for you to have. So you can listen, understand what are the combination. But please remember, these are just the tools, but the core principles, what we just learned 5 minutes back, is also equally very, very important. So that comes us to the almost the last part of the session, right? So we have looked at all these very, very different courses. You would have gone through all these details, right? Now, predominantly, what do people think? Hey, always UI UX is a course that is meant for School of Computer Science because it involves coding, etc., etc. Coding is very much relevant there in UI UX. I'm not trying to deny that, okay? But please remember one thing. We as a company have opened this entire option. Irrespective of whatever is your branch, you are still eligible to take a UI UX design. 2 reasons. As long as you're interested in that A, and you have little bit of design skills and little bit of programming language, which is more than enough for you to get into these things. Okay, so you have understood the problem statement initially in the previous webinar. In this webinar, you clearly understood what does an UI UX domain look like, what are the principles that we work upon, what are the tools that we work upon, how does it have everyday application, etc., etc. And if you're further interested to understand how is it we can even give you an assured placement in this particular domain, especially during the time of pandemics, right? If you look at it, right, we still are able to show placement records. For example, in March 2020, when the lockdown is happening, we've still been able to place 10 out of 11 clients. The other guy is almost placed the next month. So we have been maintaining a very, very consistent placements record across very much different countries, especially in the domains of UI UX as well, not just electronics and code, right? We have had etc., etc. Put a message by saying clap query, CLAPPQUERE, whatever query that you have regarding this program, want to understand the price, want to understand how does this work, etc., etc., with your name, phone number, email ID, and your query. Okay, the clap query phrase has to be there so that the API will understand that you're actually inquiring for the clap program. What is clap is Kerylabs Assured Placement Program. That's what the full form means about. So any queries, any doubts that you want to get in touch with, we'll be able to get in touch with you in this particular number. So quickly hit the pause button, note it down, send your queries, and our team will get in touch with you very, very shortly. All the very best for your career, guys. Hopefully, I delivered justice in this session. Thank you so much. Quickly take a pause and note down this particular number. I'm just signing off from this session. Okay, because after the session will end.